You never know who's listening when the music stops. On a $30 million yacht packed with power brokers and opera snobs, one mistake from a golden-voiced diva becomes the punchline to a cruel joke, until the invisible maid steps out of the shadows and silences the world. This is how Lauren James's life changed forever. On a night when the only thing dirtier than the dishes was the way people looked at her, until she opened her mouth and changed everything. If there's a place in the world where secrets hide in plain sight, it's the deck of a billionaire's yacht on a Mediterranean evening. Everything sparkles: glass, laughter, ambition. But some things shine for the wrong reasons. The Aurelia wasn't just any yacht. It was the kind of boat that made headlines just for docking in Monaco, a floating palace where the napkins cost more than some people's monthly rent, and the caviar had its own security detail. Tonight, even the sunset seemed staged, warm gold flooding the deck, setting the tables ablaze with reflected light. Champagne-colored linens, silver so bright they blinded, crystal so sharp it could cut the air, and everywhere, the hum of money. Lauren James wiped down the last marble counter in the galley, the citrus of cleaning spray lingering beneath the heavier scents of saffron risotto and seared scallops. She kept her head low, her apron immaculate. On a ship like this, the help wasn't meant to be seen, unless someone spilled Bordeaux or dropped a fork. She'd learned, in her 6 months with Aurelia's crew, that you could vanish in a room full of people if you wore the right uniform. Most guests never saw her, not really. She was just the help, a shadow behind the scenes. The men wore tuxedos and the women diamonds, and somewhere at the head table was Walter Fenwick, media king, theater kingmaker, and the kind of billionaire whose opinions echoed through every opera house from Paris to New York. Tonight, he wanted a show. Not just dinner, a performance. A rising star, imported from Vienna, a platinum blonde with a voice that had already been priced in 7 digits, was scheduled to sing for an audience of investors and critics. They called it discovering the next Callas. They called it an opportunity. Lauren called it noise until the music stopped. The opening notes of O mio babino caro soared over the deck, as scripted. People clapped, pretending not to be judging every breath, every gesture. Lauren kept to the shadows, stacking plates, humming along under her breath. A habit from childhood, when her mother still believed music could save them from anything. But something was wrong. The star's voice wavered on the second phrase. She stumbled, caught herself, tried again. The air changed, so subtle at first, a tightening of shoulders, a flicker of disappointment crossing perfectly sculpted faces. Then the voice cracked, high, shrill, uncontrolled. It was a disaster in slow motion. The manager's eyes went wide. The sound technician's hand darted to the mixing board, killing the mic as if it could also kill the embarrassment. Whispers rippled through the crowd, laughter sharper than the silverware. Someone in a navy suit leaned over and hissed to a friend, "They paid for that?" The star blinked, a rabbit in headlights, and fled the makeshift stage, leaving only silence and the clinking of anxious forks, the joke that changed everything. And then, the voice. Not the singers, a guest somewhere near the middle of the room, trying to be clever. "Let the maid sing. She's always humming when she cleans anyway." It was supposed to be a joke. Rich laughter burst out, sharp, relieved, cruel. A few people actually turned to look for her, eyes scanning for a punchline. Lauren froze, a cloth still clenched in her hand. All the years of being overlooked didn't prepare you for the moment everyone suddenly noticed. She should have stayed quiet. She knew that. Fade away. But tonight, something inside her refused to shrink. She stepped out from behind the column, her shoes almost silent on the teak deck. Her apron was starched, her hands still damp. She walked past the stunned, silent staff, past the manager whispering, "Lauren, don't," and right up to the microphone. She didn't ask permission, didn't apologize. She looked Walter Fenwick dead in the eye and nodded. Once, the way her mother taught her. A simple promise. If I'm going to be seen, I'll be seen on my terms. What happened next didn't feel real. It felt like something out of an old movie, one of those black and white miracles where the world holds its breath. Lauren sang. Not tentatively, not with the hesitant quiver of someone who'd spent years hiding. Her voice was clear, full, and shockingly powerful. A sound that belonged in golden theaters, not kitchens and laundry rooms. Notes rose and fell like tides. You could hear the years in her phrasing, the late nights, the closed doors, the dreams put aside for bills and doctor's appointments. People forgot to breathe. Someone in the back let their fork slip, clattering to the deck. The investors stopped calculating. The critics stopped critiquing. It was impossible. The maid, the girl they'd never seen, was singing better than the paid star. Walter Fenwick stood up, slow as if in a trance, his knuckles white on the railing. "I know that voice," he whispered to nobody. "That's the girl from the Royal Academy audition, the one who vanished." Lauren finished the aria, let the last note die in the warm evening air, and stepped back. No flourish, no smile. She bowed her head once, dignified, strong. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the applause hit. Tidal, stunned, not for the novelty of the moment, but for the truth of the sound. Lauren didn't cry. She didn't even blush. She looked at Fenwick and said quietly, "Lauren James, my mother got sick. I couldn't leave her. That's why I never signed." Walter nodded, for the first time in years at a loss for words. Back in the kitchen, Lauren set the cloth aside. The staff gathered around her, half in awe, half in fear for what would happen next. The star singer wouldn't meet her eyes, but Lauren just washed her hands. She'd sung for herself, for her mother, for the hundreds of times she'd been told to lower her voice. Upstairs, the world was changing. But below deck, Lauren was still Lauren, and she knew, as she listened to the hum of conversation turning into rumors, that nothing would ever be the same. There's a silence that only happens after real music, the kind that soaks into your bones and shakes something loose you forgot was there. On the deck of the Aurelia, no one moved at first. You could hear the waves, the nervous shuffle of a server trying not to drop a tray, the almost childlike disbelief in the air, like people waiting to wake up from a dream. Lauren stood at the edge of it, still breathing slow, still fighting the old instinct to apologize for taking up space. But the crowd didn't let her fade. One by one, the applause swelled, rolling over the railings and bouncing off the water, raw and real. Because for a moment, every person on that yacht remembered what it felt like to be surprised. Investors, critics, millionaires, all their masks were gone. Some clapped out of guilt for laughing earlier, some because they'd never actually heard that aria sung with anything except technical perfection. And this was something wilder, sadder, more dangerous, the sound of someone singing for her life. At the heart of it all, Walter Fenwick didn't sit. He watched Lauren like she was a ghost, or maybe a promise he'd once made and never kept. In his mind, he was back in that auditorium in London, remembering the teenage girl in thrift store shoes who had stunned a panel of jaded academics into silence, then vanished with nothing but a polite thank you and a borrowed bus fare. He'd wondered for years what happened to her. He'd heard rumors, family trouble, a sick mother, a missed train, but he'd never known for sure. Now, here she was, wiping her hands on a cheap apron, and suddenly everything he thought he understood about talent, about luck, about the way the world sorted people, was turned upside down. Nobody noticed the star soprano slinking away, the way you forget about a broken vase when you find the flower it once held. A journalist for a music blog, who had come for a puff piece, fumbled for her phone, voice memo already running. The manager hovered in a state of shock, too afraid to yell, too stunned to praise. The yacht's staff watched Lauren with a new wariness, as if her voice had revealed some secret power, and maybe it had. For years, Lauren had trained herself to work without being seen, to listen to the world from behind a door, always careful, always quiet. Now she felt every eye on her and, for the first time in too long, didn't shrink from it. Walter was the first to step forward, but not the last. He crossed the deck with a kind of gravity that made space for her, and when he reached her, his voice had lost its usual thunder. "Why did you leave?" he asked. And in his question, there was something almost like regret. Lauren answered honestly, the way she always sang, simple, no drama. "My mother needed me. She got sick. I couldn't leave her alone." She looked him in the eye, daring him to judge, but he only nodded, absorbing it all, filing it away for some future reckoning with himself. Around them, the mood shifted. The guests, who an hour before would have bet on the certainty of the night's star, now whispered Lauren's name. They asked each other where she'd trained, how she'd ended up on a cleaning crew, how talent like that could hide in plain sight. But Lauren didn't bask in the glow. She excused herself, dignity wrapped around her like a coat, and slipped back below deck. She hung her apron, washed her face, and stared at her reflection in the little mirror over the crew sink. Her hands shook, not with fear, but with a kind of electricity, a live wire running under her skin. She pulled out an old folded piece of paper, smoothed it on the tiny counter. Her mother's handwriting curved across the page. Breathing exercises, scales, reminders to sing with your whole body, not just your mouth. Lauren traced the words with her fingertip, grounding herself. Upstairs, the party was changing shape. People calling contacts, managers plotting phone calls, 1,000 small engines of ambition revving to life. But in the quiet belly of the ship, Lauren closed her eyes and let herself remember why she sang in. The first place, she stayed there a long time, long enough for the world to find her again. The manager knocked, nervous, deferential. "They're asking for you," he said. "Mr. Fenwick wants to talk." His voice was different now, not bossy, not dismissive, but something closer to awe. Lauren straightened her shirt, tucked the paper back in her pocket, and walked up to face whatever waited for her. When she stepped into the light, it wasn't just the yacht's chandeliers or the phone cameras flashing or the swirl of curious faces. It was possibility, heavy and bright and terrifying, and it tasted like the breath you take just before a new song. The morning light came early on the Aurelia, flooding the decks with a softer, less judgmental gold than last night's fire. But there was no going back. The world had already shifted, even if half the guests pretended nothing had happened. The kitchen hummed, staff in a controlled panic. But Lauren found herself calm. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe relief. She'd spent her whole life worrying what might happen if she ever let the world hear her. Now it had, and instead of being smaller, she felt, strangely, more real. She stepped out onto the deck, expecting to be sent straight back below, maybe even fired for breaking some invisible rule. Instead, she found herself face to face with a wall of cameras and well-dressed strangers, journalists who had already heard last night's story spinning out across the world. At the center stood Walter Fenwick, looking less like a king and more like a man who'd finally remembered why he started searching for voices in the first place. Lauren wore her cleaning uniform still, the same faded navy apron, the sturdy shoes, the sleeves rolled high. She could have changed. The stylists offered, but she refused. If she was going to be seen, it would be as herself, not as some instant fantasy. The other staff watched her from the doorway, uncertain, torn between pride and disbelief. Even the star soprano peeked through the curtains, half hiding. A press conference, on a yacht, with the girl who, yesterday, would have been invisible. Lauren squinted against the light, heart pounding, but she didn't flinch. Fenwick stepped up to the mic, voice firm, words simple and honest for the first time in years. "We are proud to announce an exclusive contract with Lauren James, a true voice, discovered in the most unexpected place." The words washed over the crowd. She will perform in Milan, London, and Tokyo. A world tour. The voice we found. The reporters went wild. Questions tumbled over each other, but Lauren barely heard them. Her eyes were on the screen of her battered old phone, the only thing she'd carried with her through every shift, every job. On it was a photograph. Her mother, younger, healthier, smiling the way she never did in the hard last years. Underneath, her mother's handwriting. "You always knew what truth sounded like." Lauren smiled. Real, private, proud. This moment wasn't just for her. After the noise faded, after the handshakes and the offers and the impossible promises, Lauren slipped away to her tiny cabin, the one that still smelled of bleach and old mattresses, the one she'd claimed as her own when nobody cared who slept where. She closed the door, set her phone on the bunk, and pulled out that sheet of vocal exercises. The same one, now creased and fragile, that had carried her through so many dark nights. She sang, not loud, not for the audience, just for the feeling of air in her lungs, the freedom in her body. "Everything starts with breathing," she whispered, eyes closed, "and with not being afraid to breathe." Outside, the world was changing. Her name was in headlines, her story already being retold, sometimes true, sometimes dressed up for the cameras. But inside, Lauren James stayed who she'd always been. Not a miracle. Not a symbol, just a woman who finally got to sing her own truth, loud enough for the world to listen. For the first time, that was enough. And for Lauren James, it was only the beginning.